going to talk a bit about war and the unexpected.
A couple of years ago, I had a good friend who was a middle school teacher, and he invited me to come to his class to talk about my career. So I put my uniform on, and I spoke for a little bit, and at the end I opened it up for questions to all the little kids. And there was a little boy in the back, and he raised his hand, and he asked, "How many people have you killed?" You know, we may not be as direct as that little boy, but I still think that we all have some basic level of curiosity about war. What's it like? You know, we all live in a time and in a country where most of us will never have to face war firsthand. But we still feed that curiosity that we have by watching Hollywood movies or by reading other people's firsthand accounts to understand what it is like. And it probably wouldn't be very surprising if I told you that most of those sources are pretty far from the truth. So what I hope to do tonight is to ask and then eventually answer two questions. Number one, what's it like to go to war? And two, are there leadership lessons that we can draw from other people's experiences in war and then apply to business? Well, I had a lot of preconceived notions about what war would be like when I first arrived in Kandahar, Afghanistan in 2010. I was a platoon leader for a 30-man element, and we occupied an outpost that was on the far outskirts of Kandahar city, and we were all alone, just me and these guys right here. And you know, for the first several weeks that I was there, I was constantly waiting for the first barrage of gunfire to break out or for our outpost to be overrun. And to be fair, for a lot of my peers across the rest of Afghanistan at that time, that was their reality, day in and day out. But I found my experience was a little bit less dynamic than that. As a matter of fact, sometimes war could be just downright boring. And after being there for some time, I started to feel like I was living in the movie Groundhog Day. Like every single day was the same. We would leave on a patrol, we would go and meet with some village elders, and we would ask them what were the problems in their area. And then we would come back, and we would debrief everything in a patrol log. And more often than not, what I would write in that patrol log were the letters NSTR, which stands for nothing significant to report. But I think that a lot of those experiences, the ones that stood out the most to me, were the memories that where something happened out of the ordinary, where something unexpected happened. Like, I remember the time when I was out on a patrol with my platoon, and I got food poisoning. And all the veterans are laughing already. They know where this is going. And so we're walking, and I told the guys, hey, I need you to stop and take a knee. And right there in the middle of a farmer's field, I just dropped my trousers and I did my business. It was pretty embarrassing. And then when we got back later, I was walking through their tent and I saw a couple soldiers gathered around a computer and they were just laughing to themselves. And I came over to see what was so funny, and they recorded that entire thing. They got me pretty good. You know, I also remember the time that we went out on a patrol with a military working dog. These are some of the most amazing animals you'll ever meet. And this particular dog caught the scent of what seemed to be an IED, or an improvised explosive device. So we backed up, and we let him do his magic. He was sniffing at first, and then he kind of honed in on a certain area, and he pointed. And you know, we figured that there's got to be something buried here. So normally what we do is we would get on the radio and we would call up EOD, which is like the bomb squad. So as I'm trying to do that, this dog has a mind of its own and it starts digging. And I'm like, this cannot be good if he decides he's going to mess with this device, whatever it is. So he starts digging, and slowly we start seeing, more and more of what's actually buried there. And it starts looking like there's a pipe that's there, like a white PVC pipe or something. And I'm like, I have never seen an IED that looks like that before. And at this point in time, we'd seen quite a few. And so it keeps developing, and he digs this whole thing up, and I peer over the edge, and he's got a bone in his mouth. And so some of those times that were unexpected were pretty funny. I also remember, February 20th, 2011. I was sleeping in my tent, and one of my sergeants came over to me and he said, "Sir, you need to come see this." So I got up and I followed him back to his tent. And when I got there, his whole squad was gathered around, all 9 of them, and they were staring in the corner. And they were looking at one of the sergeants who was sleeping. But when I came closer, I noticed that he wasn't sleeping. He was dead. His face was pale and it was gray. And when I went to take his pulse, his skin was cold and it was hard. And it looked like he had just fallen asleep and didn't wake up again. So I grabbed my medic and we loaded him up on a stretcher and we started to move him to our aid station. And as I was carrying him, at one point I kind of lost my footing, and my corner of the stretcher kind of dropped down a little bit, and his head rolled back, and blood seeped out of the corners of his mouth. And when we finally got to the aid station, I knew I had to call my commander. I knew I had to tell him what had happened because we had to get this body evacuated. So I walked over to the radio and I picked up the hand mic and I froze. What do I say? It wasn't long before we got the toxicology report back and found out that my sergeant had overdosed on heroin. I had mentally prepared myself many times over on what I would do if I lost a soldier in combat. But I never thought that it was going to happen like this. And now I somehow had to find a way to lead my team through this. And there was questions that I had and thoughts swirling around in my head, like, how do I help a team through the grieving process while simultaneously keeping them focused on the mission so that we don't lose somebody else because we're being careless? There's no clear answer to the question that I had. Believe it or not, there is no Army manual on how to deal with a dead body immediately after it's expired. And there's no instruction booklet that will teach you on how to guide a team through tragedy. And there's no computer software program that will prescribe the right words for you to use so that you can best inspire and motivate the team to go back outside the wire and to risk their lives again. I just want to go back to the original 2 questions that I had posed earlier. The first one was, what's it like to go to war? Well, it's kind of hard to say. As I told you, most of the time war is just pretty boring. And then out of nowhere, it can be complete chaos. And then sometimes war will present you with a situation that you couldn't possibly have expected. And that brings me to the second question that I asked you earlier, which was, are there leadership principles that we can take out of experiences from war and then apply those to business? I think there's many, but from my own experience, I'll offer up just one. Expect the unexpected. Let me tell you what I mean by that. You see, there are routine situations, and then there are unexpected ones. In the business world, routine problems can be pretty easily handled by a new hire or an analyst, or sometimes you can just plug the numbers into an algorithm and it'll solve it for you. And generally, These are the types of problems that don't require a leader as much. But what do you do when you're faced with a situation that you couldn't possibly have expected? Everyone in this room, at some point in time in their career, will face a situation where they don't know what to do. I'm talking about an economic downturn, or a bankruptcy, or layoffs. These things happen every day, and they will happen to us at some point in time. And when they do, your people aren't going to be able to turn to an instruction manual or a guidebook, and there's no algorithm that's going to solve the problem for them. They're going to look for a leader. They're going to turn to you. And when they do, what are you going to say? I don't have an answer for you on this one, unfortunately. I wish I did. But I can tell you this. As future leaders, we have to expect the unexpected. We have to study what other people have done before us, and then we have to prepare as much as we can based off of that information. And then we can just pray for wisdom that we'll make the right decision and say the right things when the time comes. And then, when the completely improbable happens, and we're faced with it, and everyone comes to us, and their eyes are fixed on us, waiting for guidance or inspiration, know this: these are the times that leaders are made for.